Oh, really? No. Welcome to Town Hall, folks.
Has it on their word or?
We're going to start our meeting. This is a Town Board workshop meeting. We have a pretty full agenda for tonight,
Okay, then they've sent it.
and we're going to add at least 2 resolutions for a vote tonight. So we want to discuss those and make sure people know about them. But let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance, or the attendance by a town clerk, and then the Pledge of Allegiance.
On the roll call, Councilman Troy. Present. Councilman Dibney.
Here.
Councilman Valentine.
Here.
Councilman Butari.
Here.
Supervisor Stewart.
Here.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Charlie. Just a couple of quick announcements. Once again, welcome. Who folks are here. We're in a workshop mode. The bulk of this agenda will be up for a vote next week. A couple of announcements. Number one, just to advise, we have a member of the Housing Authority Board who is moving on to greener pastures, and we thank Robert Tompkins for his service, and he thanks the town board for the opportunity to serve. And also, just as a heads up, it's the time of year to start thinking about vacancies on our boards and committees. And for the town board members or anybody who's in the room tonight, you know, we always rely on kind of the social network to bring good folks forward who are interested in serving. So before long, we'll have a list of boards and committees out to the town board with anticipated vacancies, and we'll work together to recruit some good townsfolk to serve on them. The second item here is just that there will be a public hearing on October 3rd related to amending our town code for violations and penalties. The third item is document shredding on October 21st. And with the big Equifax kind of leak of personal information, I think all of us are kind of need to be more on our toes about identity theft and the service that the town provides, particularly the town clerk, in organizing to have a shredding day is helpful for town residents. And I would encourage people to come out and shred old bills and checks and other items that might possibly fall into the wrong hands if they were just thrown in the trash or recycling. And lastly, there will be a public hearing on November 14th on our budget with after that will be final budget adoption. Tonight, I'm going to give a sort of a summary of our tentative budget, which is the first draft, which is produced by myself and the Town Finance Department in consultation with our department heads. But we're going to do that after we have a couple of presentations of topical interest to the community and the town board that we've invited for tonight. Starting first with the Blauvelt Fire Company. Annually, the town has a contract with Blauvelt Fire Company. Michael Conklin is here. He's leading his team. I welcome you to take the podium for a minute. The fire company provides absolutely essential service, obviously, and it's the one fire company that the town has a contract with. All the others are independent, and we thank you for your service. The town board, I believe, has copies of your budget. I got a couple of, I got one here. Does everybody have it?
Yes.
It's essentially flat, which makes for kind of a short conversation, but I encouraged Mike, you know, to come in anyway, because I think it's really important that the public, and we are on TV and this is recorded, hear a little bit about what the fire department is doing with tax dollars and anything you want to tell the town board.
Okay, good evening, Supervisor Stewart and Town Council. My name is Mike Conklin. I am the treasurer of the Blauvelt Volunteer Fire Company. I've been with the company for 44 years, and we are proposing to be our 73rd year. Here's our budget for this coming year. So for 72 years, we've been serving the community of Blauvelt. A very good success rate as far as that. We do have some changes in the budget, not too much. Our members are getting older, so our LoSAP program was a little bit lacking as far as that. So we have to purchase annuities for our older members as we go along. Again, after you're 62 years of age in the Blauvelt Volunteer Fire Company, you're entitled to your LoSAP program. And we do have about 7 members that are still staying with us and working as volunteers. As far as our trucks and stuff, we have a plan. The plans have been also put with the budget there, that we've staged out our 20-year program to a 25. We've also changed our vehicles for our chiefs from a 5-year program to a 6-year program. We are continuing to bring our equipment up to date as far as new things that are coming out. Of course, NFPA and all the OSHA regulations are always hitting us for other stuff. So as things change, our air packs are being updated. And then, of course, believe it or not, we're 20 years into the new firehouse. We call it the new firehouse, but it's 20 years old already. So we're seeing issues again with air conditioning and stuff. Nothing lasts forever like it used to. So there's a capital improvement program there. We've been working on it. We've worked on our fund balance. We've actually taken stuff from that for our equipment this year. And I think, like you said, we're on a flat budget this year from the same as last year.
Any questions from town board members? All right, I don't want the brevity of this presentation to be mistaken. The work you do is very, very important. It's just we've had this conversation before, and I think we're pretty familiar with it, and we appreciate the work and the consistency. We will have as you know, the fire district budget requires a separate public hearing from the town budget, and that will be scheduled. Did we say October?
I believe October 17th.
October 17th. It's a time for community members to express any comments they might have. It doesn't require any more of a presentation than what you just made. So we'll be back just to complete that public hearing
Okay.
on the 17th, all right?
Sure.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mike.
The next item up is Kevin Joyce. The topic has to do with the zoning in the downtown area of Pearl River. They brought with them counsel, Brian Quinn, Jay Greenwell, architect, the owner of the property, I believe, is there. And just for a tiny bit of background, the group represents a really significant parcel in the downtown area that is being proposed for a PAC zone. And the board has a role in that legislative process, and we're happy to entertain a proposal and to learn more about what might be the benefits of that zone change. So Brian, the floor is yours.
Sounds like we're done then. I was told to be quick. Yes, good evening, Mr. Supervisor, members of the town board. I'm Brian Quinn. I'm the attorney for the proposed applicant here, Galway Bay Contracting. Principal is Mr. Tom Acton, sitting next to Kevin Joyce. And we also have on our team Jay Greenwell, who would be our surveyor, as well as Bob Hone, who's going to be our architect on this thing. So we've kind of assembled a team, and we're enthusiastic about making a proposal to you, but we thought it best to come before you on an informal meeting. Assuming we don't hear any objections to the proposal, and we understand there's nothing binding at this point, we would like to come before you in short order with a formal application for a zone change. This would be under the town floating PAC zone, active adult community. And the zoning code itself has some unusual twists and turns to it, so we were just kind of strategizing a bit ourselves. And I think the inclination here is to come before the town board, make application for the zone change. And assuming the town board gives us a positive response on that, we would then put together a formal site plan. You know, any amendment to the zoning, of course, would be subject to approval of a site plan by the planning board. So there's a number of hurdles and obstacles that need to be pursued on this, but this is the first step. We wanted to come before you and at least introduce the project to you. We did have some informal meetings with one of the interim building inspectors and the town attorney just to discuss some of the finer points of the zoning. And so I think we're prepared to go forward on this. And I'd like to introduce Bob, who's going to be the architect, and he could give you a little bit information about the project.
Thanks, Brian.
Hi, good evening. I'll just go down the different pages of the handout and try to explain. The first page is a site plan which shows a darkened-in area, which is our existing building. We're not adding anything to the actual footprint of the building. We're just adding 2 floors to the existing building. Each one of the floors would house 8 apartments, for a total of 16 apartments, senior apartments. And the existing lower level, grade level, will remain, shops and offices and things like that. We're one of the few sites in Pearl River that actually has a relatively large parking lot. We think we can get approximately 40 cars in there, which will service the existing shops that are there now and the units above. If you look at the elevation that we prepared for the existing building, you can see the lower level, which is the shops, and the 2 floors above it, which are the apartments. And again, each floor will house 8 apartments for a total of 16 apartments. The next 2 pages are basically the apartment layouts, which are the same for both floors. It's sort of a center hallway, elevator area, and 4 apartments on each side of that, again, for the total of 16 apartments. We've included a photograph of the existing building so you can familiarize yourself with what we're actually talking about. I grew up in Pearl River, so I kind of know this building as being the old Grand Union building when I was a kid. And it was then owned by the Amon family. And my sister is married to one of the Amons. And I've worked on the building over the years, breaking it up from the existing sporting goods outfit that was there into these smaller shops that are there now. And again, the existing building stays, the footprint stays. We're not getting any bigger on that. We're just talking about adding 2 floors to the existing building.
And just remind me, would there still be shops on the bottom or not?
Yes, there'll still be everything that's there now. The only change to the first floor of the building will be a common area where we'll have our stairwells and our elevator. You have a tax lot vicinity map that was prepared by Jay, and it basically shows some of the surrounding properties. And number 67 there is the building that we're talking about, and the 40 parking is our parking that we have on site. So that's basically the gist of it. Basically what we're talking about is taking the existing building, adding 2 floors to it, not extending out, not creating any new impervious surfaces or anything like that. We're basically going over the top of the existing building that's there now.
Bob, so it's going to be 8 one-bedroom apartments and 8 two-bedroom?
Well, I have it broken down. I have a couple of 2 bedrooms in there, so we're not totally sure.
It looks like on the plan, it's 4 and 4 per floor.
Yeah,
4 inner ones are 1 bedroom, 4 outer ones
Right.
seem to be 2 bedroom. Okay.
but we have flexibility on that. Probably can create all 1 bedrooms if we had to. I don't think we have any real need for a 3-bedroom on a senior, but
Are you gonna be doing elevators, or are you gonna have?
yeah, we're going to have a center core, which will have an elevator in the building, and stairwells, 2 stairwells, which is required by code for egress.
What's the square footage on these apartments?
I think they average, I'm going to say between 600 and 800 square feet per apartment. I think each floor works out to be about 9,000 square feet total. I would say they're probably around 8.
Right here.
Jay Greenwell, land surveyor. Bob just touched on one thing very briefly, but I do think that one of the prime advantages of this site.
If you could just get closer to the microphone, because I know that.
I think
folks
one
are
of the
back
prime
there.
advantages of this site is that it's fully paved. There is no new impervious surface going in, so there's really very little impact from construction activity. The whole site is already devoted to what we would need. In fact, we probably would need to remove some of the spaces to create some walkway access areas and some landscaping to make it a little nicer where the senior housing would enter the site. There would be almost no impact from construction. Again, no impact on drainage. As Brian indicated, we will need to move forward and spend some big bucks on getting the site plan prepared for the planning board to review, but we did want to bring it up to you guys to see how this was received.
You know, I think it would be helpful, and our town attorney could help out with this as well, just to outline what a hypothetical approval process looks like. What is being petitioned for to the town board or to the planning board, what the sequence of that decision-making is, what the criteria for approval might be. Just because it's a PAC zone and there's a special process for that, it's not like other kinds of approvals.
No, it's not. And there is some flexibility in the zone, but it also can be, from somebody who's not familiar with it, can be a little confusing. And so that was part of the reason why we did have some consultations, because we wanted to make sure that we were looking and interpreting things correctly. But I think the approval process would involve initially submitting a petition for a zone change, which is why we are coming to you first. Assuming, and there are a number of items that need to be included as part of that petition. Traffic study, market analysis to confirm that there is the demand for this, you know, a conceptual sketch, not a formal site plan, that isn't needed until planning, but there is a bunch of work that would be needed to be done. And assuming the town board views that in a positive fashion and is willing to grant the zone change, then I understand the next step would be to make application to the planning board for a site plan approval. And the zone can also be somewhat restrictive in some areas, and depending on what we ultimately present, there may very well be a need for some variances. So we need to go to the ZBA. Of course, architectural review, we'll have to go through it as well, too. So I think every town board gets a little crack at this one, or, you know, chance to review it. But I think it is sited in a good place. It is downtown Pearl River. I think it is a good redevelopment of an existing piece of property with very little environmental impacts. As Jay was saying, it's not going to change the drainage. It's not going to change the impervious surface. There is existing parking there now. I think it's just a matter of really working our way through a plan, getting some feedback from the various boards, and seeing if we can't make this thing work.
Brian, Bob, or Jay, the parking that's listed here, the 40 spots, that's what's required, or you're going to need a variance for parking? Will that cover the 16 apartments and the retail that's there?
The parking requirements for office and retail is 1 per 200 in the CS zone. And the PAC zoning requires 1.5 cars per unit. We came up with a tentative total at this point of about 68 required, and we're very close, or 2/3 of the way, that we would be providing 40 spaces. And the beauty part is that we're also right next to the Pearl River lot, as you can see on that vicinity map, the town lot. And a lot of these uses would not be conflicting in terms of time, because most of the office areas, and Kevin's taking a big piece of it, is closing at what? You know, they're not open, parking all night long there. So the residents would be able to park frequently overnight without conflicting with some of the uses of the shops and the offices down below.
So could you just clarify, you know, so if the basic pitch is for a development where requires shared parking or some kind of plan for parking management, you know, how is that, or is it formalized, or is just the assumption that any spillover, they're just going to have to look somewhere else if they can't find a spot? Does it require an arrangement of some kind for use of the town lot? Is there a way that the daytime use and the evening use?
Andy, to give you some background, when there is senior housing on the corner of William and Central, and that had no parking.
Right.
And there, in order to change that zone, we had to come up with some arrangement with in terms of town parking, for the residents there that had parking. In this case, all right, they have substantial parking. All right, now and again, whether it meets the exact criteria of the PAC zone, I don't know that. All right, but again, in downtown area, it's a little bit different. And the fact that you have 40 spots there right now is obviously a plus. And if some accommodation had to be made, all right, it's a thing where the town, the Pro River Parking Authority should know what the usage is on the William Street parking and also the other one that's behind Gildays, in between Gildays and Washington Avenue, which is, I think, where we put the parking the last time. So, it's something that needs to be looked at. But
Yes.
I don't see it as insurmountable.
But to answer your question, I think that the proper approach to this would be to come up with some agreement internally where certain spaces are reserved for the office and the retail use, and certain spaces are reserved primarily or exclusively for the apartments.
And perhaps establish hours of usage too for the retail versus the residential,
And just first of all, the basic principle of investing money in the site, creating a valuable place to live, adding that foot traffic potentially to the downtown businesses, having it be age restricted. I think, speaking for myself, I think probably the rest of the town board, people in the community, want to see how to make it work. And so the questions I asked are just kind of clarifying questions. And at some point, sort of curious to see how that route goes. But speaking for myself, I would like to see the formal petition. And so if you're looking for a sense of where the board stands, I'd like to see it. And I'm interested to see exactly, sort of what, with the town board decision-making process, does that cover the parking? Or do we basically, your petition is for a zone change, and then we kick that over to planning board and say, all right, maybe these guys have enough parking, maybe they don't. So where exactly that kind of comes out in the plan?
I think it comes out at both ends, because before you have the approval from the town board, you can say, we're not giving you approval unless you have X amount of spots.
Right.
Because one of the questions I have is, how many of these spots are going to be dedicated exclusively for residential? Because if you're doing 55 and older, then the seniors that are going to be living there should be getting, a number of dedicated spots that can't be used for commercial use, because
Pretty much that whole back lot would have to be dedicated
yeah,
to residents, and the side lot would be for the businesses.
Right.
Because you need 24 probably for the apartments,
Yeah. Yep.
16 apartments, 1.5, that's 24
Yep.
spots.
yeah, it's 24.
And there's 25 back here, so that's pretty much.
So part of your petition to the town board would include some kind of parking
Yeah, just explain the
assessment
parking
and
a little
plan.
bit.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I think that's where you get into neighborhood concerns in part. I have no idea, as far as the side streets and how sort of accessible or parked up they may be, and those are the kinds of questions that come out.
Sure.
I mean, if I lived there and I couldn't find a parking space, I'd be looking for someplace in the neighborhood to park my car.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, this is all part of the good planning.
And actually, if I
process.
lived in the neighborhood and I couldn't find a place on the street, I'd probably want to park my car in your parking lot. So it kind of cuts both ways. So the parking management, I think, would be one of those nitty-gritty questions that needs to be sorted out.
Yes.
So what is our process? Any other questions, folks, for these guys? So you'll make a petition, and at that point, the town board will have further discussion. If it's a zone change, I guess it requires public hearing,
Right.
and we'll kind of go from there.
Yes. Yes.
Is everybody on the town board favorable with getting a petition? Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I'm fine with you going through the process. I think it's a good plan.
Good.
Thank
Okay,
you.
look forward to seeing
Thank
you.
you for your time. We'll be getting a petition together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is the Orangetown Mighty Midgets. The question essentially before the town board, which has been discussed before, is the sale of a portion of town-owned land commonly referred to as Lot 1, which is, come right up. we're gonna need you. Who's Brian? You're representing, which is.
Yeah,
As
it's
most
me
folks,
again.
maybe not everybody knows, but it's a piece of land that's kind of at the corner of Orangeburg Road, Old Orangeburg Road, across near the soccer complex, and with waterfront on Lake Tapan. The offers made before, and essentially to buy the land by Orangetown Mighty Midgets for the purpose of building playing fields to be privately owned and managed, and we understand that there's a real need for that in the community. The Orangetown Mighty Midgets has shown the capacity to do that kind of development, and I welcome the proposal. I will say just at the outset, which like I said to you before, there's a lot of work going on right now to identify the right amount of land to set aside for public use adjacent to proposed private development of the remaining state and town lands. And I would just say that, and I hope we get more information both about this proposal and how it would fit in with other potential developments and the need that the town has for actual town facilities as well.
Yes.
So there's a lot of kind of eyeballs on this piece of land right now.
Right.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, well, thank you again. I was recently retained. I understand that Orangetown Mighty Midgets has previously spoken with you, made a presentation. I understand that there was some questions, and I've been working with Frank Payne and other folks over at Orangetown Mighty Midgets, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. I know 2 of my 3 boys went through the OMM process, and I'm sure you know the size of that organization. They have how many kids are in it presently, Frank? 3,000, and they've been, as you know, that there are some beautiful soccer fields over there. The demand for soccer fields just continues as the size of the league grows, and a new factor also is you will recall that New York City Football Club purchased a piece of the old Stedge property that the town used to own many years ago. And I came before this board, and we talked about some of the restrictions, and ultimately that deal worked out. New York City Football Club purchased the property. They're in the process of building their training facility, which I think is a very exciting process for them and for the town. It really got some good news out there from the town. New York City Football Club, I continue to consult with them on various matters, are very interested in development of local talent. You probably may know that there is a team member on New York City Football Club who came out of the Pearl River area, and they have been interested in working with some of the junior leagues, the travel leagues, and things of that nature. And so you will see among the I think Frank has given you a written term sheet proposal there, and attached to it is a letter of support from New York City Football Club, which if this deal goes through and OMM bought this lot, they would be the next door neighbor. So they have spoken with OMM about working on things that would be mutually beneficial to both New York City Football Club and OMM, and I think that would be a wonderful thing if that can be developed. But in any event, I do understand all that's going on over at the Rockland Psych property. It's kind of exciting to see after all these years that there's a real interest in purchasing the property over there. I've been consulted recently by another entity that has expressed an interest in buying some property over at the Rockland Psych the former site campus, both from the town and from the state. And they have told me that they were not interested in this particular lot. I was happy to hear that, so there's no competition with that entity and OMM in attempting to acquire this lot. So I know there's a lot going on with the Rockland Site property. I know about the recreational covenant that the town is trying to work out with the state, and how there's a lot of moving pieces here, and that the town is interested in trying to get an overall plan together as to how this is all going to be worked out. But, you know, at this point, Orangetown Mighty Midgets wanted to come before the board again just to assure the board of their continued interest in the property. They would love to acquire the property. It's a solid offer that they're making. They have the ability to do this financially and otherwise. So we're hopeful that the town will consider it at the earliest possible time. We understand there's a lot of other things going on over there, but sooner the better as far as they're concerned with it.
Brian, do you know how much the acreage of the 3 wetlands that is mentioned in this proposal, how much of that property is considered to be wetlands?
That is, they've done some preliminary work on that. You know, obviously, actually, we had Jay Greenwell do some preliminary survey work for us, and you know, that is definitely a factor. It does seem to be a kind of a high water table over there. I know they encountered the same thing over at New York City Football Club's lot. So that's something that needs to be fleshed out, Tom.
Your own data here, it's well, Matt, the 6.5 acres that is wetland, that you're considering wetland?
There's 32 acres with 100 setback, it's 25.7.
Yeah, please.
So, good evening, Frank Payne for OMM.
Tom,
So,
6.5 acres.
What?
so I forget if it's that number, Dennis, speaks to the wetlands, an estimate on the wetlands, but we also adjusted for the proposed setback.
That includes the setback.
Yeah, so the gross was roughly 34, 35, 36 acres. If you adjust for the wetlands and for the proposed setback from the lake, that's how you get down to the net 25 number, which is what we used to make the offer. That's the basis of the offer, the net 25, and that's, as Brian said, the work that Jay Greenwell did in terms of due diligence on the site.
What's that, in the 100 foot?
The 100-foot comes back to the town.
Right.
But the wetlands.
Well, that's a good question. Well, who, I guess, who retains ownership of the wetlands? The town or you guys? Or what, like, we've
Well, I
had the
think-
same discussion with another developer. Basically, like, are you taking fee title to the wetlands or no?
I think the wetlands are in the middle of this proposal, right? So,
Yeah, there's one relatively large piece that's off the waterfront, and there's a couple small pieces that are closer to the water. I think, say it differently, some of the wetlands are inside the proposed 100-foot setback, so by definition, we're not seeking to acquire that component. The 100-foot setback portion that rings the lake would stay with the town for their proposed waterfront park. Anything that's not inside the 100-foot setback, that's a wetlands area, it's not usable, we're not proposing to purchase that piece, but I can't tell you specifically how much of the acreage that is. It's minor, 1 or 2 or 3 acres.
I think to clarify, if I understand you right, Frank, because, you know, bottom line is, you don't want to have to pay for land that you can't build on.
Correct.
But you're not, but I would think your proposal would be to actually own that unbuildable land. Otherwise, you'd have a wetland that you don't own smack somewhere in the middle of a development, and it would just be kind of weird.
Correct.
Normally, it would be acquired in fee, but subject to the wetlands
Right.
regulations, which is basically, you're not gonna go in there.
Yeah, so you
It would
basically
have to be
you're adjusting your purchase offer,
On basis of.
calculated based on
unusable
buildable land, but your proposal is to pay for buildable land at $100,000 an acre and to be given the wetlands, which are not buildable, but which
Correct.
would be in the middle of the buildable area. So that
Yes,
it-
there's one of them that's in the middle of the
Yeah,
the lot.
the little pond would be, yeah.
Another yes, correct, that's consistent with our proposal.
Right.
Another aspect of that is, as we saw in the development of the existing soccer complex, sometimes new retention ponds that may need to be built can be placed adjacent to and coordinated with some of those wetlands areas, so it would be important to have that part of the ownership and control for purposes of planning the site and the water runoff and retention and so on and so forth.
Right.
Is the financing in place? I mean, some of the proposals we've entertained didn't go anywhere because it was a grand plan, but there's no money behind it.
We're confident that we can execute this deal. As you know, some 10, 12 years ago, when the first complex was built in cooperation with the town, that started a process whereby we've invested millions of dollars into the complex. Today, we fund 100% of the operating expenses, and most recently, we completed close to a $700,000 capital improvement project. So we're confident with the financial profile of the club and with our partners that we can execute that purchase price. And I think we demonstrated a strong financial commitment to the town and what we've done at the existing complex.
Yeah, I'll just say for my part again that, I said this outside in the hallway earlier, the town currently has a request for proposals out. We need to choose one to help us conceptualize, at a preliminary level, what our waterfront park should look like. Its access, its dimensions, how it fits in with adjacent existing or possible land uses. And we have some matters sort of actively under consideration related to the improvement of the parks maintenance garage, an area for the town highway department to dump snow, things that are happening up on the near the Hunt Road, the sewer pump station. So in my view anyway, and we have to provide really guidance to the state and how we plan to satisfy the 216 acre for public use deed restriction in the town's original purchase of 348 acres from the state. Those matters are, actively being worked on, but they are unresolved. And in my view, as welcome as the proposal is and as substantial as OMM's commitment is, it is certainly premature to sell a portion or virtually all of Lot 1 without having some of these other pieces figured out. So that's my feeling about it, and I'll continue to work as fast and furiously as possible to resolve some of these related matters and get to the point where there's a real clear plan for what the waterfront park should look like and what kind of land would be for private sale beyond that. So I'm just speaking for myself. That's my view of it.
Last question. Are we still dedicated to doing a waterfront park along the whole waterfront?
We don't have a conceptual, a diagram or plan. So what we have is we have a commitment on the part of the town. We really have a deadline, essentially, for complying with the deed restriction. And we have the parkland alienation legislation, which calls for 30 acres of waterfront park. The shape of that and its exact location remain to be determined. So when you say the entirety of the waterfront, I would say no, it doesn't need to be on the entire waterfront. It just needs to be 30 acres and
30 acres, but there was always the concept there'd be a walking trail on the water.
a connector. I think
End to end.
that's why you want to have a plan, because whether it's a sliver, 100 feet or 200 feet around the edge to get folks connected with the road and other park facilities, but where is the sort of the bulk of that 30 acres going to be? If you draw that sliver around the edge, it comes to roughly 8 acres or something like that. So clearly, you're going to capture a bigger piece of land once you get over more towards the core of the site. How much of that Lot 1 is involved is exactly the question. Where should that line be drawn?
Well,
and that's what we
I
need to
guess I'm
figure out.
just saying that you have that whole area, that whole area right on the waterfront that is more than 30 acres. I'm just saying, the board has been saying we've got to decide what is going to be dedicated to parkland. We've got to do that because we are under a time frame. I've looked at it, and to me, it always saw lot one would be something else right near, that would be something offered for sale. Also, right near Staff Court would be something that would be developed, and everything else would be parkland. And that's, maybe that's not the answer, but we've got to decide sooner rather than later what's going to be parkland, what's not going to be parkland, regardless of what is coming down the pipe or who is coming up with very, very, very early proposals for that property. So,
Right.
we've got to do it. We have a time frame, and that's how I feel on that.
Yeah, and we did get an extension. I think it's to, well, but I personally am fully committed to using my office to try to get to a conceptual waterfront park plan. And I think our outside deadline on that, not that I want it to take that long by any means, is sometime in 2020, because we got a 5-year extension on the deadline from the state to dedicate the 216 acres. We're also going to want to get relief and not have to do a total of 216 acres. So exactly,
I mean,
to
we've
your
been
point,
saying,
Tom, we need to make that
I mean,
plan.
the thing is, we've been saying we want relief for 8 years. We haven't gotten relief. We've begged, pleaded numerous times. We've hired lobbyists. I mean, we can say we want relief, but, I mean, the state sold it to us. John, what's the total number? Do you have it offhand?
348?
What? How much did we buy RPC for? $6 million. How much are we selling the Chase property for? 7. So, and then you have another lot. So you're going to go to New York State, and this is just how I see it. You're going to go to New York State and say, we need relief. But why? You've already recovered your numbers. Like, New York State's just not going to say, all right, you get relief, but you've already made money off of it, and part of the reason we sold you this property for this price was because we wanted a lot of it to remain parkland and to be open space. It would be great if they would give us relief, but, I mean, it may or may not happen. That's just what I'm putting out there.
Yeah, we're getting money from Chase, in 2017. However, the taxpayers of the town ate the cost of that over the last 10-plus years. So it's a thing where when they sold us that property for $6 million, the economy was going great. And then the economy crashed, and it just changed the entire market. All right, now things are coming back. All right, so it would be disingenuous of the state to say, oh, listen, you made all your money back. All right, the state left us with 65, 70 abandoned buildings with lead and asbestos in it. We're fortunate enough that we have a buyer coming in that's willing to take on that responsibility. State didn't give a damn about us or anybody else when they left that to us. And that's what we got. For the $6 million, we got that plus the liability on those buildings. The other thing is with the 216 acres, all right, we have the New York City Football Club, which you brought in here. New York City Football Club does not count as park or recreation because it's private. Now, if we sell to OMM, which I'm in favor of, the issue there is, again, even though that's open space, those are fields, that doesn't count against 216 acres. But the people who are in charge of the definitions is New York State. They can change that. Tom, when you and I initiated the change, matter of fact with Brian, with O&R, for the substation off of Leicester Drive, I went around with somebody from the New York State Parks and Recreation Department. I think John was with me, I believe.
I was there.
And you were there. And what I did, I took them around to veterans. Then I took them into the South Orangetown Little League fields. I took them into the OMM facility. And the issue was, we were giving up 3 acres of parkland over on the Leicester Drive. We owned 10 acres there, and it was 3 acres we were gonna give to O&R, or swap to O&R. The guy from New York State was blown away by what we have here in terms of parks and recreation. He was. The only unfortunate thing is that's not the person making the final decisions up in Albany. Albany is tough to deal with. That's why we have John, and that's why we have lobbyists. Counting on John to take
Dennis,
care
I
of this.
understand that. All I'm pointing out is that New York State, after 8 years, hasn't given us any relief. And it would be a little naive to think they're gonna give us relief for 216 acres. They're not gonna give us that. They might say,
They may if the right proposal comes along.
yeah, and
If they think they can get some economic development and some photo ops for
And-
Cuomo to run for president,
Well, here's the thing, what they think is the right proposal may not be the right proposal for us, because they thought Legoland would be the right proposal, and this board said no. So what I'm saying is, they might try to force something they think is the right proposal, which doesn't work for this town. I'm just saying, we've got to make that determination and not rely on the fact that we'll get relief. That's all I'm saying.
Tom, I agree with that, you know, in terms of what the state thinks is the right proposal. There were some proposals in the past that they thought was the right proposal for RPC, and it was definitely a monumental detriment to this town, which it never went anyplace, but
Which is one of the
that
reasons
came
why.
out of the governor's office back in, I don't know, it was 2004.
So and I think what Dennis is pointing to, this is all context, Frank, you know, the need to have a appropriate development on the former Children's Hospital site is a key priority for the town. The power plant will eventually be vacant, and that would also be a big priority. Those are 2 state-owned parcels. There's town land that links them together. So clearly, town land will be involved. The question is how much and where to draw the line as you get down to the waterfront. And those are priorities to sort out too. And also bearing in mind that every acre of town land that we sell for private development, whether it's to the data center or it's to Orangetown Mighty Midgets, reduces the number of acres we have with which we can fulfill the obligation to the state to set aside 216 acres. So pieces of the puzzle, a little bit of a game of risk, and the conversation will continue. But I hope in short order to at least have a waterfront park kind of conceptual plan that we can talk about with more specificity as to the available areas for potential private development.
Do we have a date when that's coming back?
I'm not going to, I don't have a date per se, no. It's a work in progress. So if we're all right with that for now, I feel like that's a good sort of conversation around the topic. I'd like to move on to other items on our agenda for tonight. Thank you, Frank, for coming in, and Orangetown Mighty Midgets for all their investment in the soccer complex.
Well,
Brian.
we appreciate your hearing us. We just wanted to let you know that we do have a buyer that's ready, willing, and able, capable of doing this, you know, has a need for it. You know, you drive past those soccer fields day and night, you see the kids out there, and it's, you know, it's a good usage. I can appreciate more than I think most people understand all of the moving parts that are going on in the Rockland Psych property, and it's all part of good planning. You know, in a perfect world, all of this stuff would work out to everybody's satisfaction. And the one thing John has told me consistently is the state doesn't move quickly on things, and I've come to personally appreciate that. You know, but whatever can be done to move that along with the state, we would greatly appreciate it. I think it will be ultimately to the town's benefit here. I think we'd love to see that restriction go away or be resolved somehow satisfactorily. And again, just appreciate your taking the time to hear us, and we just want to stay on your radar. We're still very interested in acquiring this piece of property.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
I'd like to move right along now and give copies of the tentative town budget to members of the town board. I just want to, okay, you've got it, good. There's another handout which Dennis had asked for, and there will be supplementary information. The town board owes request for sort of analytical information from finance. But this is the existing debt. This comes straight out of our CAFR document, and that was just something that Dennis had asked for, and it's for your review as well. But let me just summarize where we're at, and I'll do this quickly. It's a small meeting, and in some ways, a lot of the drama associated with the town budget has been resolved in years past. So I'll make this short and sweet, but I don't want to be so quick as to not give proper recognition where it's due. So number one, and I think this has always been the main concern of this town, is the proposed budget is in compliance and well under the New York State tax cap. In a few minutes, I'm just going to ask Jeff, our finance director, to give the town board a little bit of a briefing on the tax cap calculation and the town's position with respect to that. But it's well in compliance with that, and that doesn't mean that there aren't important choices to make within that, but it's good to know. I also wanted to just start by thanking Jeff and also Janice Ganley in your office, Vicky, right here, my assistant, Alan Riff, deputy supervisor. You know, it's a process of going through a budget with roughly 600 lines and trying to really consider the needs of our town departments, and also thank our department heads who, you know, almost to a person presented really useful information and timely budget presentations. And obviously, some stuff is absolute necessity, and some is more on the kind of wish list, and making those determinations is not easy, and we appreciate their cooperation with that. The fact that I feel like it's important to repeat is that property taxes are really high in Rockland County in general. And that means we have among the highest, essentially nationally or worldwide, really. And so we have to strike a balance between funding really, really essential services that the town provides, without which there would not be public safety, and making sure that folks can afford to live here. I am confident that the budget we put together, you know, 99% will be the budget this town board will want to adopt by majority vote in mid-November. But I'm also confident that with your eyes on it and in consultation, further consultation with our finance department, department heads, that changes that are appropriate will be made. And I know that we all share the view, and I certainly do, that the net impact of any changes, we have to stay under the tax cap, and we don't want to jeopardize critical services, and that's the balance that we all need to strike. I just want to list a couple of highlights. The tax cap, and Jeff will talk about this in a minute, you know, originally it was a 2%, it went down closer to 1%, depending on the time the state was calculating real estate values and other factors. It actually went up a little bit, and so our number that we have to stay under is an allowable increase to the tax levy of 3.4%. This budget comes in at 2.9. The tax cap itself is a complex calculation, and the allowable increase in the tax levy is determined by trends in real estate and pilot payments and other factors. And we're always faced with this problem, right, where the typical homeowner's tax bill increase may be bigger than the percentage change in the town budget, and everybody's always scratching their heads about that, and I'll have Jeff talk a little bit to that question. But it looks like about a $110 increase for the typical homeowner with a $200,000 assessed value home. And that increase, we all know, is partly driven by the shift in overall tax burden between residential and commercial property owners. And residential properties have been doing very well in Orangetown. It's something we should be proud of. I think we could take a little bit of credit for that, because the government is in a school district, and other public sector activities are a big factor in what maintains and improves property values. But that means that the shift has shifted that way, and homeowners are going to see a little bit of that in their tax bill as well. I want to remind ourselves of just a few of the things that we've done as a town board and staff to cut costs and to control spending. And I want to remind us particularly of how the shift over in our golf operations is just paid enormous dividends, around $800,000 a year of savings, paying down the debt that the golf programs ran up against the general fund. That was really great work, and it continues to pay a dividend, as I mentioned. The conversion of 2,260 streetlights over to LEDs, similarly, although it doesn't involve a reduction in the total number of personnel in town like the golf deals did, which we did through attrition, it does save a good amount of money, and it's essentially a technological efficiency. It comes to at least $200,000 a year. We're supposed to be closing on those ownership of the lights in short order, and I just want to congratulate the finance and our town attorneys and the town board. We reviewed proposals. We've contracted with installers and for the purpose of the LEDs, and they're going to be going up, and we're going to be saving a lot of money and also improving lighting and safety and reducing greenhouse gas production due to the energy savings. As mentioned earlier, our sale of town land to JP Morgan Chase for a data center has really been an epic process. Many of the same folks involved, and that's going to help our tax base and help relieve taxpayers of a part of the burden. At around $7.5 million for 60 acres, plus perhaps as much as $40 million in remediation. You can do the calculation per acre of invested there just to get a clean site. I guess it's somewhere north of $700,000 an acre or something like that. Hopefully I'm not doing that math wrong. So town land is worth a lot of money, and it's good to see it develop for a great purpose. We had Orangetown, might have been just in here a couple minutes ago. You know, the new fee for non-residents that was instituted a year or so ago has really paid off. I think it was, what is it, $100,000 or something like that was brought in new revenues.
I'd say about 120, 130.
So
120,000.
yeah, so OMM and other groups. So that's a new area of revenues. And I just want to mention as well, to give recognition to the grant writing program and the colossal amount of paperwork that goes into it. Collaboration between Stefan Muno and the Highway Department, Joe Moran back here, and as Commissioner of Environmental Management with the engineers, you know, the town attorneys, Vicky, you know, and Jeff's team in finance. It's really worth it, though, and we've gotten some great results from that. We're paying for sidewalks, road improvements, green infrastructure, rail trail, drainage work, and also the traffic signals, which we all know a lot of them are really old and decrepit in the town. So it's exciting to see that money coming in for town projects from other sources. And I just want to mention Ellen Jaffe and David Carlucci as our state reps, who always play a role in that. And I also want to mention as well, you know, one of the ways the town has been saving money is by just managing it better. And Jeff has spoken to that a couple of times for the town board. But the timing and the manner of going to market for buying electricity, for example, and also for doing bonding transactions, I think has been handled in a way that has saved the town a lot of money. So those are some of the savings, I think, you know, just to help you explain to our public what is going well and how we work every day to try to keep the budget under control. Despite cost drivers, which are really always there and unfortunately always outpace our efforts to save money every year. And those are things like the county cost shifting of Board of Elections and community college chargebacks, which adds up to over $400,000 a year. Suez, and that's really the Public Service Commission, is bumping our cost for the water districts for hydrants by, I guess it's about $200,000, right, when you look at 12% over 2 years. I mean, that's a lot of money. You know, and personnel costs, of course, are always the real driver behind the town budget. And that's partly salaries, a large part, but it's also health care, insurance. Health care is going up almost 10%. Workers' comp insurance up, I think we're charting almost 20% for 2018 on that. So these personnel costs are clearly the major cost driving factor in the cost of government. About 70% of the town budget is dedicated to paying our staff. I feel personally that we are operating with the minimum necessary staff. I don't think you can easily find anyone out there who we could do without. The police department, the highway department, the parks department, everybody is working hard, and unfortunately, the only way to really save money in government is to get rid of people, and the fact is that we need the people we've got, and so that's a tough nut to crack. I do want to give a little bit of credit to, the pursuit of efficiencies does really matter. And the governor's tax cap and the more recent focus on shared services, although that hasn't really borne out in terms of much in the way of savings, I think it's a good principle always to be looking for ways to save money. And I think we have done that, and that's helped us stem the tide a bit. But the cost of labor continues to go up. And I would encourage folks, if you're listening on TV or tuning in and watching this YouTube, that at some point look at the websites for the Association of Towns and the Conference of Mayors in New York, because they have legislative agendas that describe reforms in Albany that would help local governments to work more efficiently, and to look at those agendas and support them. Lastly, I want to thank our town staff, our fellow town board members. I really do look forward to working together to make any necessary adjustments in this final budget before its adoption in mid-November. Copies of it will be on the website. There's obviously going to be a need for follow-up and questions, and the finance department will provide any information that it can to help town board members discern maybe further areas of savings that are possible within the budget, or maybe areas where revenues could be enhanced in some way. So thank you very much. And Jeff, if you could just come up for a minute, I wanted you to just brief the board on the tax cap calculation, and also to talk a little bit about, so virtually all of our capital equipment purchases and road improvements and all these really expensive long-term investments are now captured by a bonding process. This budget doesn't speak to that. It sets a number for debt service, but the town board will need to review a comprehensive list of capital equipment and projects coming from our department heads and make determinations related to that. So if you could just talk a bit about the tax cap and the bonding process.
Sure. Thank you, Andy. So obviously, the tax cap this year is actually 3.4% and not the 2%, so you're probably going to get questions on why that limit is at that level. So the first thing is it's mated to the CPI, the inflation index, and that was up 1.84%. So that's the starting point. The calculation also allows for a growth in assessed value. In our Orangetown this year, we had an increase of 0.7%, so not quite at 1% in our total assessed value, but obviously that's good. The more we can grow our assessed value, the better it is, because if we have whatever our town budget is, if we're spreading that out over more assessed value because we've added assessed value, that actually reduces everyone's taxes a little bit because you have more people paying for it. So those two factors right there accounted to about 2.6% of the 3.4%. Then the other factor is pilots, and so what you do is you add this year's pilots, which were 1.96 million, and you subtract next year's pilots, which are expected to be 1.57 million. So that was roughly $400,000 right there. And then the final thing is whether you were under the cap the year before we were, and that was 103,000. So you add that to it. So net of all of those impacts is our tax levy cap increased 3.4% versus last year. And then the supervisor's budget has it going up 2.9%. And so in total, the tentative budget is almost $400,000 under the tax cap. If you'll notice, I also provided Excel spreadsheets with the revenues and the expenses. If you turn to the second to last page, what you'll see there is the capital items that have been requested for bonding. This is totals $13.2 million. What I asked all of the department heads to do is provide me with their needs, their capital needs for the next 2 years, being 2018 and 2019. So that's really what this is supposed to do. Our last bonding was in August of 2016. In 2017 and 2018, we'll pay off $4.5 million a year. So we're for over, which is pretty consistent. It was $4 million, now it's $4.5. So over a 2-year period, we will pay off $9 million. So to stay at level indebtedness, you know, we probably want to have a bond that is $9 million or less to not increase our overall debt service. In terms of when the bond is issued, obviously the board will authorize it either late this year or early next year. You're looking at issuance probably April, May. The first payment will not be until January of 2019. Therefore, this wasn't, you know, increased debt service is not included in this budget because we will have no debt service in 2018. The first payment will actually start in 2019. And then if you turn to the last page in the handout I gave you, I have listed all the macro trends and assumptions in here. The biggest one is obviously our workers' comp and risk, which I have going up at 20% again this year. You know, our auditors came and presented. Last year was the first year we actually used fund balance, even though we've budgeted for it all 4 years I've been here. We actually used it last year. The reason for that was solely on the workers' comp side of it, where we incurred $2 million in losses and we had only budgeted $1.4 million, and so that was a negative $600,000, and we ate into our fund balance by $500,000 last year. So that was the entirety of that. Now this increase will take the total to about $1.7 million. The good news is we are tracking very well this year, so we're probably going to be below the 1.4, but it can fluctuate from year to year, and you get a big payment, and you can easily jump back over that figure. So everything's in there. I will also send the board the Excel file tomorrow, so you can sort it in any which way you wish. But at this point, I'll just take any questions. We do have revenue increases for the sales tax and the building department. The building department is at 1.45. We were at 1.35. It's in the revenues. The first 3 pages in the it's in the revenue section there. So.
School tax.
That was kept at the tax collection fee. You mean? That was kept at 1/8%, so no increase. Okay, if that's it. Yeah, no, that's.
No, it's a lot of information, and you know, the board should take time to review it. When are we supposed to have a tentative budget? Do you remember the date on that? So within a month, we'll want to, you know, we should work together to research any adjustments, modifications, and get those requests for information to Jeff and his team as soon as possible, and look to see whether we can make any adjustments in the preliminary budget approval. And then, of course, there'll be a public hearing and final adoption in mid-November.
Okay, thank you.
So if that's October 17th, yeah. So thank you again, Jeff and Vicky and in absentia, Alan Riff, and everybody who's helped so far. Now, there are two, moving on to our agenda of matters on the workshop agenda, there were two items that we wanted to add for a vote tonight. And one of them is a simple one having to do with event support. And Tom, maybe you could just describe that and maybe write it down since Charlie's not here right now. And
We have
recorded in some way.
assistance from the Orangetown Police Department regarding lights for the picnic at Franklin Avenue School tomorrow. They provided the lights because it's getting darker a lot quicker. And I told Sergeant Sullivan that we'd vote on it because he had already agreed to approve that. And I'd like to thank Sergeant Sullivan and Huey for helping us out with that.
Okay, so the resolution would read, Town Board approves OPD providing lights for an event on the 27th.
27th Franklin Avenue picnic from 5:30 to 7:30.
All right. Do I have a motion for that?
Moved.
Divany. Second over here from Dennis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous. So I had Tom Divany, motion. Who was it? Was that Dennis? Dennis, second. All right. That's one. The other item, Tom, do you want to discuss this now, or do you
Yeah,
wanna-
we'll just keep it.
Okay.
Every,
This is the matter relating to retaining special counsel, and there should be a copy in front of each of the town board members right now. I don't- Jerry, you got it? Okay, good. Everybody's got
all
it.
right, the
Great.
town board is going to retain special counsel to review its laws, rules, and regulations, to make sure they're consistent with current lawful practices as well as best practices with regard to health, safety, and welfare. We're going to be retaining Farragut, Lynch, McCartney, and Nugent to review our codes, our zoning codes, and provide us research and documentation of the code and how we can improve them, capped at $30,000 and an hourly rate of $250 per hour. And it's just related to that specific provision of reviewing the code for lawful practice as well as best practices, just that specific area.
So Tom's making a motion for this.
Moved.
Jerry, you want to make a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. So we'll, yes, sir.
I don't know that it's necessarily critical, but I think item 7 relating to the Pearl River Cemetery, which was essentially just to confirm that the period of permissive referendum had passed on the conveyance, and therefore the earlier adopted resolution was effective. I'm not sure where the Pearl River Cemetery people stand in their dealings with the State Cemetery Board, who is reviewing well, maybe Bob Knight here would know. But it's perfunctory because there was a resolution adopted subject to permissive referendum back in July or August. The county approved it, and this pretty much just clarifies that it is now effective. So when I spoke to Dave and Englander, I think I told him it would be on for a vote on the 26th. So it's up to you guys.
All right, we've already voted on this one.
Yeah, no. You
Yeah,
wanna
this
make
has
a
been
motion
laying
to
around
approve
for
this?
months, going back and forth with the county, so,
I'll make the motion.
Motion
all right, I'll
approved.
second it.
Second from Dennis, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, so that one was voted on.
All right. Number 1.
All right, it's such an important thing. It's glad to
1,
get that
2,
done.
3, and
Okay, so the first few resolutions have to do with setting a public hearing on amending the town code relating penalties for violations. And we've talked about that before, and these basically outline the public hearing, the secret process, the code edits our amendments are contained here, and so I think we're good to go on that. Number 5 has to do with another public hearing, changing the code requiring the planning board to review applications relating to, bless you, Dennis, relating to antennas on existing structures. And this would declare lead agency and circulate this code amendment, which I think everybody's had a chance to read. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Nope.
You're all set, okay. The 8th item, skipping over 7, which we just voted on. The 8th, I'm sorry, did I miss something? Uh-oh.
Page 8.
Uh-oh.
Just setting a public hearing for October 17th for the Blowout.
I'm sorry, thank you. So the Blauvelt Fire District's public hearing will be on the 17th. And we appreciate the town attorney's office publishing that notice and chasing after it. Number 8 is lending assistance to Team KJ Duathlon on October 8th. Number 9 is Showmobile for South Orangetown Day, October 14th, really fun event. Number 10 is a surplusing of equipment from the Highway Department. A couple of items there, going back over 20 years in age. And a bunch of spare parts, if anybody needs some brake shoes. Number 11 is, this is an item which we should talk about. This is the proposal which has been discussed, and I think this language is the same. And essentially it is that it would create a benefit to operators, assistant operators in the sewer department. Joe, maybe you should just come up to the podium. If they pass a test, it gives them a higher level of license from the DEC, their salaries would go up. And the town has an interest in this at some point, and this is kind of early action on it, because it is highly likely that we will require assistant operators with the higher level of licensing, assuming that the plant is recategorized by the DEC as new processes are added for dechlorination and other things that result in its scoring as more complex and therefore needing folks with a wastewater 3 license as opposed to the 2, right?
That's correct.
So that's the context for this. And to me, anyway, I think it makes sense to offer more money to folks who have obtained a license that the town needs. And the only question is how much more money and when, since we don't need it right now. And presumably when the state changes as anticipated at some point, there would be some time. But then the problem is that there's widely regarded to be a scarcity of trained and certified wastewater operators, and it's not always easy to find one.
Well,
So
that's right. That's right. And there's a history of
the
hard.
current grade is 14, I'm sorry, 14, and the proposal is to go to what?
17.
17.
I will note that the grade 1 assistant operators are grade 11, and that the grade 2 are grade 14. So we're proposing grade 17, relatively consistent with that salary and level of responsibility.
So again, I feel like the question is, how much of a pay increase to put out there, and when to do it.
Well, it's a benefit to the town to do it when they acquire the grade 3 certification, so that we're not kind of scrambling, so to speak, when this does become a requirement from the state. And it is extremely likely that this will be a requirement from the state based upon our new Speedies permit and the new requirements that they're mandating right now. It's also not going to happen overnight for the 3 gentlemen that we have currently working as grade 2s. So I think it's better to be prepared and have them certified as the grade 3s and pay them at a salary that's commensurate with that responsibility of a grade 3.
Joe, I have two questions. What is the county's grade? Do they have any grade 3s? What is the county graded at?
Honestly, they must, because
we
their scoring is higher than ours, so they must have.
So can we get
grade
a
3.
comparison on what they're being paid as a grade 3?
Could do that. I
And
don't
what-
I don't
what's
know
the-
it,
What's
but
the
right
added
offhand.
responsibility if they're doing the same job, but they had, I'm just wondering, like, what's the added responsibility that they're getting?
Well, it's a level of responsibility that they've always had, and they have to report to the state any type of spills. They have to respond to any inquiries from residents and
I agree
blockages.
people
And
should be paid higher for having more education, right? I mean, there's no denying that, they should. For certifications or education, there's a value to that. But you keep saying they have more responsibility, and I just don't understand it.
well, they'll be responsible for monitoring and testing and sampling of the additional equipment that will be required at the plant
So
in
when
accordance with the SPD's requirements.
When we go to, when they come back and say, all right, your plant is now the next grade, they're gonna make us put in more equipment?
No, when we have to comply with the SPD's permit requirements that are mandated now, with the revised SPD's permit that we received last December, when we do that work, then the grading will increase.
So the chlorination equipment is what you're talking about?
That's part of it. That's the first step, right? The total residual chlorine effluent limitation, yes.
So it's really two, there is some added complexity because they've added a process when that's done.
But if they don't change, the chlorination's coming in no matter what, right?
Right, and it's
So
likely to
they're
trigger.
gonna have to take care of that if they're a grade 2 or grade 3. So I think they should get paid something for passing the test and doing their job. It's hard for me to understand what the added burden is on them.
Well, we went through this several years ago.
And I keep asking the same question, Dennis.
I know,
and it
but
never
at that
seems to get
time, we
answered.
also had 2 grade 3 operators, and they may have stayed if we had done this at that time, and we didn't, so they retired, all right? Now what we have is we have grade 2s.
Which we
grade
may or may
1s,
not need a
and-
grade 3.
Can I finish?
Yeah.
And you have a lot of overtime. We need to make an incentive to get other people in the sewer department or from other departments that they would go in to this position, take the test, do the training, whatever it is that they have to do to get up to the grade 3. It's an investment in the future. I said that several years ago. Now we're in a position where we have none, 0 grade 3s.
Okay, so the incentive isn't that a couple of guys in the sewer department make the majority of the overtime. So that's not the incentive, that they wouldn't go over there.
Well,
And so they don't want to be a grade 2, but they will go over there if you make them a grade 3. That doesn't make sense to me, because they're the ones making the majority of the overtime as it is,
the people who are in grade 2 right now.
Right.
But they have no incentive whatsoever to go to a grade 3, which protects the
Right.
town. Because you wanted to block it going back several years ago, and we're still
No,
blocking it.
I didn't see the need for it when we weren't a grade 3 sewer department,
Right.
when it's
It
not
looks-
required.
And we're still not a grade 3, but it's likely to occur with the required improvements to
Okay, so I guess
dechlorinization.
the
So
thing
then
is,
you'll end
do
up
you
in a
go
situation
from-
where you need
You go
the
from
license.
14 to a 17.
That was my
which
question, too.
Where we were last time.
It's basically amount of money and timing, and I think your question's relevant. I mean, like, it's guesswork as to what amount of money creates an incentive. I don't know, you know?
And are we gonna get new people to go do that, or is it gonna be just the same 3 operators going from grade 2 to grade 3?
I would think you would get other people coming in.
Joe, didn't you hire a 4th operator?
Yes, he's coming on board in a couple of weeks.
Right, so that's gonna reduce the overtime issue.
Yes. He's a 2.
And so the question is, when the state changes the classification of the plant, and the town needs people with wastewater 3 licenses, are we gonna have them? Or how long will it take to get them to be in compliance with the DEC? And this change theoretically will get us ready for it if folks actually go out and take the test,
Andy,
pass
it
it.
could take you 3 more years if we keep clowning around with this one, you know?
So, but I would like to know what the, essentially, what is the justification for a grade 17 proposal as opposed to a 15 or a 16, all of which would be, salary raises? Like we're not talking about a 20, so why is it 17 as opposed to a different number?
They supervise the grade 1s. That's number 1. So there's a supervisory component. They
Right.
make independent judgment calls in the middle of the night as to whether or not the severity of a blockage, whether or not to call in a driver at 2 o'clock.
Right, they're already
3
doing
o'clock
that,
in the
though.
morning.
So
They're doing that, yes,
Yeah.
and
that's part of the job as a 14.
right.
So I get
Okay.
it. That
Th-
it's you
But
want to
that's a
have
level
people
of
get this
responsibility
license.
that they shouldn't be
Yeah.
paid as a 14 right now.
Okay. So what's the difference between a 16 and a 17? Basically, why do we got to go to 17, given that we're trying to
As far as
stay under
money
the tax
goes,
cap and
or
everything
is-
else?
It's about $3,400 in salary.
Joe, next week, can you have what the difference in pay, if somebody goes from a 14 to 17 or 14 to 16? So that way, Andy could run us around the block next week, Paul can run us around the block, and then we can vote.
Okay, I can have all those numbers next week.
Well, just a rationale for the 17 as opposed to a 16, I guess is what I'm looking for. I realize that in any case, it's a part of the union contract, needs to be agreed to by both sides. Presumably, the union is be looking for a raise, whether it's a 16 or 17. So.
Dennis, we were at a 16 last time and they rejected it. Wasn't that correct?
There were at that time, there were other factors involved, and I didn't believe that you were supporting 16, never mind 17 at that point.
I think we were. It was rejected.
All right. Enough on that one? Okay. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
All right, here's a parking recommendation from the Traffic Advisory Board. And does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. And that's it.
All right, I got something on new business.
There was, let's see, we already did the 2 other items in our new business.
No,
What
this
else
we're
you
not
got?
voting on, this is just a,
Okay.
I want to set a public hearing for November 14th to amend Chapter 24C10B, Property Maintenance, Parking, and Storage of Vehicles. Right now, it allows for commercial repair of automobiles as long as it's less than 2 vehicles on the property in a residential area. We shouldn't be allowing commercial repairs of motor vehicles in any residential area. So I worked on this with Rob Magrino and want to set a public hearing for that. So we have 30, November 14th. Well, today's the 26th, that gives us 7 weeks.
Yes, 30 days from
30 days
from
commencement.
the 3rd, right? What was the proposed public hearing date?
November 14th.
Yeah, so we should be able to vote on it on the 3rd and get a notice out and
Yeah.
have a,
Yeah, that's,
yeah. And if,
that's 40 days.
the text of the proposal.
Yeah,
circulate
Rob's
that.
gonna send that over
Okay.
tomorrow.
All right, so that should be
It'll take 2 seconds.
if we will open the public hearing and, maybe it will take 2 seconds or maybe it won't, but in any case,
Let's see.
we can schedule it for then, presumably. So we need a resolution for a vote next week that sets that public hearing for When do we say again? November 14th. You got it, don't you? All right. All right. Anything else? John, do you have anything for the town board? No. All right. Eric, you all set? Okay. All right, we're gonna let them finish their conversation. Do you want to have one?
Surprised you didn't answer in Greek.
If there's no other motions or proposed agenda items, then I'll make a motion to adjourn. In memory of, which maybe in making a second, you could speak a little bit to the memory of William Archaki.
How did you vote on the cemetery?
It was,
Yes.
But who made the motion? Tiffany and then Troy. So that was all three. Sorry.
all right. Jerry?
Yeah, Captain Archeki is a retired captain from the Clarkstown Police Department. He's also the grandfather of one of our police officers, Baisley, Greg Baisley. Just remember him.
All those in favor of adjournment, say aye. The ayes have it. Meeting's adjourned.
Had one name, Margaret Donovan, pro River.
Margaret Donovan.